Good evening. It is 5:30, so we'll call the regular council meeting to order. I'd remind you to turn your cell phones to silent or vibrate, and let's all stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Chris, would you take the roll, please?
Councilmember Stevens?
Here.
Councilmember Strebe?
Here.
Councilmember Berg?
Here.
Councilmember Dalby?
Here.
Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Mayor Lazio?
Here. Item B in our agenda, I need a consent agenda, so go ahead, Chris.
Minutes from the regular meeting number 9, March 19th, 2019, and special meeting number 10 on March 26, 2019, as presented. Approve the Arbor Day proclamation for April 26, 2019, and authorize the mayor to sign. Approve the proclamation for April 2019 to be Revive Civility Month. Consideration of acknowledgement settlement agreement between the City of Ottumwa and Smokin' Hot LLC at 2604 North Court, Suite A. Approve payment to DC Concrete and Construction LLC in the amount of $11,850.50 for emergency sewer repair work on Elm Street, Force Main, completed February 25th to 27th, 2019. Resolution number 69, 2019, approving the contract bond and certificate of insurance for the Beach Phase 4 renovations, installation of new wave generation equipment. Beer and/or liquor applications for East End Hideout at 1141 Orchard Street, Mad Avenue Quick Shop at 405 South Madison Avenue, Hy-Vee Gas at 1027 North Quincy Avenue, Nose Bar and Grill at 101 South Madison Avenue, all applications pending final inspections.
Is there a motion?
Move the consent agenda is presented.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries. Item C, need a motion for tonight's approval of the agenda. Is there such a motion?
Move to approve, Your Honor.
Second.
Thank you, Skip. Those in favor of the approval of tonight's agenda say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries 5-0. Item D is reports from city officers, and at this point, we have several reports tonight, so I'd like to call upon Sharon Strode to give us an update on the Economic Development Office. So, Sharon?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'll start with my disclosure. This report includes various levels of detail that are available in a public setting. OEDC is cautious about releasing information that could risk the long-term development of some projects. I'm going to start with strategic priority number 5 for OEDC, which is called talent strategies. I don't suppose it's a surprise to anybody that right now workforce is the number one concern of most, if not all, business expansion and attraction projects. Ottumwa and Iowa as a whole needs a broader pool of candidates already credentialed with the skills necessary to do the jobs available in our industries. I'd like to give you a little bit of background, and then I'll talk to you about what OEDC is doing to try and assist that. First of all, the Iowa Economic Development Authority has been working with consultant Fleischman Hillard for the past year in gathering research material and consumer testing feedback to become more educated of the U.S. perception of Iowa. General conclusions are that Iowa is viewed as a neutral location, but that once folks have a chance to visit the state, positive perceptions can increase as much as 132%. That's good for us. In a nutshell, the right tone and messages can shift adults' perceptions of Iowa and increase the possibility of visiting or moving to the state. Their next steps include targeting certain groups to increase interest and motivate moves to Iowa. As a complement to IEDA's research and strategy, OEDC and its economic development partners in the 10-county area, and that includes and specifically targets the Indian Hills Community College region, have secured the placemaking services of McClure Engineering, also to assist with talent attraction marketing. With funding from OEDC, Indian Hills, and a pending USDA grant, this team will work to tell our best stories for Southeast Iowa. providing a counter narrative to common misconceptions of lack of jobs and things to do. We plan to begin as soon as possible, and the deliverables are scheduled to be completed by December. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Any questions for Sharon? Go ahead.
I'll move on. Strategic priority number 1 is site development and preparation. And actually, this is going to be kind of a feedback loop about the traffic impact at North Court and Foxsack Road. OEDC is pleased to be working with Ottumwa Public Works to remedy maneuverability issues at that particular intersection. And we believe we have found a relatively low-cost alternative to ease some traffic tensions out there. As you may know, the Armory sits right there on the corner, and the Iowa National Guard has provided a verbal agreement with us to move forward regarding the sale of a small piece of property which currently hosts the industrial park sign, meaning OEDC already has an easement agreement with them. Now they're looking at being able to sell that property to us. Next steps include the city securing a survey of the acreage needed for the project and then OEDC proposing the offer for acceptance. Even though this is not within the jurisdiction of Iowa DOT, because of their proximity to the location, they have been notified of the intended project and they do support that. The remaining pieces in your packet, and I'm sorry, I should have referred to those earlier. There's a white packet at all of your stations there. The last remaining pieces are really more of the, tell the story of where we've been able to move as a marketing tool for the community of Ottumwa. Because OEDC has only one employee, we rely on our website and digital marketing to act as a second staff member, working for us and providing 24/7 accessibility to key community information across many platforms. That includes land that's available, buildings that are available, utility rates and capacity, demographics, incentives, target industries, and all of those other kinds of pieces of data. In your packets are 2 analytical reports on both our website and of Mailchimp, which hosts the O-Town Optimist, our monthly newsletter. OEDC has worked extremely hard the last 2 years to get these kinds of results for our information. It's like learning a whole new industry when it comes to some of these technologies and software. If you look at the piece that talks about the Mailchimp Analytics for the O-Town Optimist, there's a lot of numbers there, and I won't go over all of them with you today, but I think that there are 2 pieces down at the bottom that really are quite noticeable, and I wanted you to be aware of this. The average open rate for any industry with a newsletter is about 20.81%. Ours is at 38.15%, so we're well above the average on that. And the click rates, which is accessing a hyperlink that's inside the piece of news for all industries, is 2.43%, and we're at 5.7%. So again, we're using this technology to the best of our ability, and we're seeing some good results. The second piece that I have for you is the Google Analytics, which tells you about what our website is able to do. And this is in descending order from fourth quarter to first quarter of last year, calendar year. So you'll see the most recent one, which is September to December 1st. Since January of 2018, for the year, 92% of our visitors are new. Now that's relatively unchanged, but in this most recent quarter, we were up about 26%. We went from 561 visits to 755 visits. And the rest of that information is just for you to peruse at your leisure, but I wanted to let you know where we're at.
Any questions for Sharon? Councilman Strebe.
I have a quick question, Sharon.
Sure.
These materials look great, and thanks for putting all of this together for us.
Sure.
When you talk about the website hits and I guess these pieces in general, how are these, who are the primary target audiences for this great information that you've assembled for us, and how do those audiences obtain this? Are they sent this information based on website visits and inquiries and things like that, or is there certain groups that already get these sent to them? Who are we putting this in front of besides the folks up here, and how are they getting it?
Since it's a multi-part question, I'll give you a multi-part answer. The website, of course, is available 24/7. Now, the important thing about that is knowing that our markets are across the United States and sometimes even globally. So the good news is nobody has to be at the office for people to be able to get this kind of information. Our target audience has always been, since at least I've been here working on this, is our site selectors. Folks that are employed by others to find sites for new business or expanded business to take place. So we make sure that we provide them the things that they are looking for specifically. Data about our labor shed, data about what's available to them. Now that we have a certified site, there's a whole section. In fact, we got the domain helgersonflats.com, which diverts directly to the website as well, that talks about all of the due diligence that's been taken care of on that particular piece of property.
Okay.
The exchange of information is sometimes both ways. We, as you can see from the Mailchimp information, we've got about 480 or so different persons that we send this to, including about a 4% rate that are just site selectors. The rest are pretty much folks that are in the local and or state area that get our information so they can keep abreast of what our activities are. So that exchange kind of comes both ways. We send things out and sometimes we get inquiries.
Very good. Thank you.
Does that help?
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Sharon. We appreciate the update.
Thank you as well.
If the council would consider, I'd like to insert a presentation that's not on the agenda, but we have a group of people in the audience tonight, and I'd like to call on Beth Payton, the president of the Bridgeview Center Board, to come and step up to the mic. And I see Michael Phillipson coming with her. So you have the floor, Beth and Michael.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. We are coming to present a check today in the amount of $120,000. Wanted to make sure I read that right. This is from the Bridgeview Center Incorporated Endowment Fund. And actually, this particular payment puts us over the $1 million mark of money that's been returned to the city. And we would also at this time like to thank the mayor and the city council for their continued support of the operations and so forth at Bridgeview Center.
Beth, you want to add anything? You want to add?
Actually, I just like to echo what Michael has said. I'm sorry. I'd just like to echo what Michael has said, that we are so appreciative of the city and their assistance in the daily operations of Bridgeview Center. It's been a blessing, and we're happy to be able to return some of that bounty that you have sent our way. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We're really pleased to get that, and great occasion. I'm sure Bob will be glad to get the real check.
She has the real check right here.
Thank you very much. Continued great success at Bridgeview. Okay, I'd like to now refer to City Administrator Andy Morris, and he can take over some of the other items that are under item D.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. The items listed on in the reports and boards, officers, commissions, I've had to add a number of items, so bear with me for a moment. The very first item you see, this is actually listed as item number 2. That's the Finance Committee meeting. As some may recall, I believe that was in 2017. We formed the Finance Committee. I sit on that. Bob Jay sits on that, as does the mayor and council members Dalby and Rowe. Our first meeting, as you see, is slated here, hopefully coming up relatively soon. Again, that would be on the 8th. I believe that is a week from today at City Hall in room 108, and that is at 5 p.m. And as those members know, essentially what that amounts to is we offer, particularly Bob has the relevant information as to how we're doing financially and how we may finish the year. And of course, the big item is our coverage ratio. The next item you see is establishing dates for the upcoming community meetings. When I came on board, we initially had 4 of them. That was probably too much, so we dialed those back to 2. So we'll have one in the spring and one in the fall. I have a tentative date, and this is tentative, for the 18th of April. I have a venue that has said they're going to cooperate, but I don't want to go ahead and tie them to this, and then if council has a variation of an alternative date. But anyway, if you would, Mayor, ask the council members after the meeting or sometime during this week, if that date is preferable. If not, we can pick another date relatively quickly and then move forward on that.
Okay.
The other item you see, I've got clearing lots. That amounts to something that I talked about at the previous council meeting, and that is some of the work that some of the city officials have done, particularly with Local 74, John Deere and Councilman Dalby. I've visited with some of the folks in code enforcement, and I see one of them here with us this evening with Zach. Asked them to give us lots that are good candidates for those, and we'll try and do. Last year we only did 3, as I recall, Matt. We're going to try and ramp that up a little bit and bring it up to 3 or 4 each time we go out and about. And then John Deere, as I said, Local 47 has been very, very supportive of that. Another item I do want to speak to, and this relates to, and again, we'll get to the overview in just a minute. Chief McAndrew is with us here this evening, and Mr. Mayor, if it's all right, would ask that you ask the chief to come to the podium and discuss an ICAP grant.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor
You have
and
the floor.
Council. This is just a heads up for council. At the next council meeting, we'll be bringing a grant that is being offered by our insurance company, ICAP. They just recently came out with this grant. It is a $7,500 grant for the first year and $5,000 for 2 years following. What this is for policy revision and ongoing training for our police officers. So I'll be putting together a staff summary, and we'll be getting that to you as soon as possible. But I know we'd like to give you a heads up on what's coming up. So I'll get that packet to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to just give me a call anytime, and we can discuss it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, to reiterate, as the chief indicated, that'll be at the meeting on the 16th. The last item I have, Mayor, relates to the State of the Community address. I've mentioned that at the previous meeting. That is going to be on Thursday, the 4th. Just to reiterate, that event starts at 11:30. The doors open at 11:30 at the hub on West 2nd Street and Washington. The doors open, as I said, at 11:30. The event will run approximately from noon to 1. And just to give folks somewhat of a vantage point anyway of what we're going to be discussing, there are 3 speakers that will speak at this first event. And at this event, the mayor, Brian Morgan from the county supervisors, and again, Marlene Sprouse, the president of Indian Hills Community College, will speak. And there will be a question and answer at the end of it. A lot of appreciation goes out to the Legacy Foundation, which has underwritten this event. Hopefully we'll have another one in the fall, but we'll see how this first one goes. I encourage staff members to attend. It is free and open to the public, and hope as many can attend as possible. Mayor, that's all I have, unless you or council members have any questions or comments.
Anything from council? Okay. Item E. Oh, yeah. Larry, we at the last special meeting, we did a grant, and we had some technical difficulties. So I asked Larry Seals, our Director of Public Works, to come to this meeting, give us a very quick overview, and he has some good slides that he'd like to share with us. So, Larry, you have the floor.
Let's do Milner first. Either one. As the mayor had stated, we had done a flight of this to try to give you an indication of the current condition and what we were looking at. This is Mary Street starting at Shaw heading east. Just kind of the overall view. You can see the entire corridor. And then we do kind of a slow flight. You can see all of the pavement distress, a lot of the joint failures, as far as from decracking. We had went in a previous project in order to extend the life of this pavement and done a full depth patch program. I think it was in 2006. What our proposal is to come through and do a full width, full depth project, including looking at and installing some sort of relief at the Liberty Schools, which is coming up shortly, from Traxler Drive down past Ferry Street. One of the things that we've experienced since the school has opened is a lot of congestion in that area, especially at the beginning of the school year, morning and release of the schools. Like any large traffic generator, that's kind of the problems you end up with. So we're going to, during the reconstruction, address some of those issues with this project. Just as a recap, the current project is estimated at $2,197,128. There's $2,055,354 worth of the STIP funding or the STBG/SWAP funding. We would match that with probably road use or loss in the future to make up the difference between the two projected amounts. One of the things, and this would be programmed for the year 2023. But it gives a real good bird's eye view. This is where we would come in and have to add the turn lane section down past. We'd also do some improvements on Ferry to allow some right turn movement. What you currently encounter is anybody that is southbound and wants to go eastbound on Mary, they'll hold up the entire traffic. We would do a short turn lane for you can continue to move right. Same way with the 3 lanes through that area would allow traffic to continue, especially if you're westbound and someone is stopped and is turning into the school. So that'll relieve a lot of pressure. The design would probably start in 21 through 22, and then letting early spring of 2023. The second one that we done was there was TAP money available. TAP can be used for multiple purposes. One of them is kind of a multi-use sidewalk trail. What we were looking at, we've already programmed swap money for this reconstruction. It's under design, or will be shortly. We went through a selection process. We plan on bringing that contract to you here shortly. Anyway, the project or the concept of this particular fund would be combined probably shortly after or during this project, and add an 8-foot use trail along the east side is our intended corridor. We'll have to look at what utilities and in the design ultimately determine where the alignment is. But as you can see, all the way from Mary to Keota, which of course is along the Dalma School area, there is no sidewalk. There are some issues with the sidewalk of the building on the corner, and then various poor conditions down through here. The goal, if you look at part of the trails plan, was to try to connect the 2 school systems, south side residential areas, to the greater Ottumwa Park. That's one of the things that we're looking at, is coming back with a REAP grant to tie the sidewalk area basically along the 2 roundabouts into the greater Ottumwa Park, and actually give some sort of safe corridor and tie the south to the greater Ottumwa Park area. That's the quick overview. The funding amount on that, again, just for the general public, is we applied for $301,735 in TAP. And this is where, kind of late in the project, because we originally had applied for CIP funding for the match, and we allocated that to other projects. Wapello County was able to come back with some reallocations of some grants and fundraising that they had done, and said that they could do the entire 20%. So that's how we managed kind of late in the game to scramble and get this submitted.
And I think, Larry, it's important to mention to the public that we had a deadline that had to meet in order to qualify, and that's why we had the special meeting on last Friday.
Yeah, exactly. We had kind of resigned ourselves to that we probably wouldn't apply this year until Wapello County Trails stepped up and said they thought they could make it happen. So then that's why we had a special meeting. It was due April 1st. And in doing that, we just went ahead and finished programming our other funds.
Any questions for Larry? Comments? Councilman, go ahead.
I have a question, Larry. In residential neighborhoods, it's the homeowner's responsibility to maintain the sidewalk and also snow removal. Since this is city-owned, would this be taken care of by city staff?
technically, a multi-use trail like this would be the city's responsibility to maintain for 20 years.
And snow.
That needs discussed, but that's what we have done in some areas.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Dalby?
Yeah, just a quick question, Larry. That you brought up Mary Street there. I know in the past there's been some concern, and I think we've had a few incidents along close to Liberty there. When we redo the entire street, is there any talk or anything about putting sidewalks in over there, something that's a little safer than what we have now?
We were going to finish. There are a few areas on the south side of Mary that has missing sidewalk. As part of this project, we were going to include that and try to connect Liberty School with the Dalma or the Milner Street Mary intersection to make a corridor that's directly connected to the school system.
That would definitely be an improvement. That's awesome. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Larry, for that overview, and I think the visual helps to give the public a better view of what you're talking about.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item E, if there's anyone in the audience that wants to address an item on the agenda, we ask you to fill out a slip and give it to Chris. Have you received any? Okay. We'll move on to item F then. Department recommendations.
Award the contract for the Beach Phase 4 RFP 4X Safety Netting Replacement Project and authorizing the mayor to sign the contract. Recommendation, award the contract for the Beach Phase 4 RFP 4X Safety Netting Replacement to Pierce Fence Company of Ottumwa, Iowa, in the amount of $3,966.88 with an alternate bid of $4,422.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Good evening, Gene. You have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Beach Phase 4 RFP 4X is to replace the safety netting around the children's play area at the beach at Ottumwa. Bids were received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on March 27th, 2019 at 2 p.m. The RFP was sent to 4 contractors and advertised on the city's website. 2 bids were received. The low bidder is Pierce Fence Company of Ottumwa, Iowa, in the amount of $3,966.88 with an alternate bid of $4,422.00.
Okay, any questions for Gene? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you, Gene.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Asphalt Street Repair Program.
Go ahead, Larry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. This project is for our annual asphalt street repair program, which started in 2003 and is used to set unit price cost. The work will consist of overlays on various streets in the city. Staff has reviewed the sewer condition and the ADA requirements for each of these streets listed below. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 1st, 2019 at 2 p.m. And a bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented to the city council meeting on May 7th, 2018 or 19, or at a later date as determined by staff. We've listed which streets we currently have scheduled for this first round and then listed the funding sources to date.
This is a public hearing, so if there's anyone in the audience that wants to address this item, now is the time to step forward. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 64, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Asphalt Street Repair Program. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 64, 2019.
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Second.
Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Catch Basin Replacement Program.
Go ahead, Larry.
This is another one of our annual programs. It's for catch basin projects, and we'll reconstruct and raise catch basin wells with new grates as indicated on the plans and specifications. Basins are located on various streets within the city of Ottumwa. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 1st, 2019 at 2 p.m. The bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at the city council meeting on May 7th, 2019, or at a later date as determined by staff. Our annual budgeted amount is $50,000 from the sewer fund.
This also is a public hearing. If there's anyone who wants to address this item. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 65, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Catch Basin Replacement Program. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 65, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Any questions? Take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Sanitary Utility Access Program.
Go ahead.
This project will place sanitary utility access and existing sanitary sewer lines and associated past work. Manholes will be placed at locations that have either limited access points or problem areas prone to plugging, causing increased cleaning maintenance. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 1st, 2019 at 2 p.m. The bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at city council on May 7th, 2019, or at a later date as determined by staff. And this is another annual program that we budget $50,000 from the sewer fund.
This also is a public hearing. If there's anybody that wants to address this item. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 66, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Sanitary Utility Access Program. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 66, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Sidewalk Drop Program.
Go ahead, Larry.
This is the 8th contract and consists of the installation of sidewalk drops and detectable warnings at various locations throughout the city of Ottumwa. The completion of these sidewalk drops and detectable warnings will be a step towards compliance with the ADA transition plan. The transition plan was approved by council on August 7th of 2012. The city-owned and maintained intersections are one portion of the ADA requirements. The overall project was estimated at $1,280,000 and is budgeted for $120,000 each year until completed. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 1st, 2019 at 2 p.m. A bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented to the city council on the meeting of May 7th, 2019, or at a date later determined by staff. We've listed the previous year's contract amounts. We have one contract still open, contract 7, and this will be for the next contract. A lot of times these contracts go over 2 construction seasons and do overlap.
Okay. This also is a public hearing. If there's anybody that wants to address this item. Seeing none, I entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 67, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Sidewalk Drop Program. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 67, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented, Your Honor.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry? Take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Street Crack and Seal Program.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Go ahead, Larry, if there are any comments you want to make.
Just this is one of our, again, one of our annual programs. It's preventive maintenance, and it consists of sealing street cracks throughout the city of Ottumwa. We look at our streets and kind of judge where is the sealant or the joint control sealant to try to prevent salt and moisture from going through and end up deteriorating prematurely the pavement. We have two streets that are recent paves that we want to kind of reseal and try to extend the life early on and try to get our design life out of these pavements. Bids will be received and opened by the city of Ottumwa on May 1st, 2019 at 2 p.m. A bid report and bid award recommendation will be presented at the city council meeting on May 7th, 2019, or at a later date as determined by staff. Again, out of the expanded street repair program, we budget $50,000 annually. The contract is set up as a unit price, and we simply run through this and try to complete the streets. If we only have 100 feet left, we will overrun this contract and it'll come out. If we are done with the street selected, it might underrun. And that's just the way we run the annual program.
This also is a public hearing. Is there anybody that wants to address this item? Sure.
Expanded street repair program.
Okay. We've already got a motion and a second. Are you ready to vote?
We have to
Take the roll.
close.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Don't we have to
Close
close
the
the
public-
public
Close the
hearing?
public hearing.
Yes.
Move to close the public hearing.
Thanks, Vic.
Second.
Thanks, Skip. Okay, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 68, 2019, approving the plan, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 2019 Street Crack and Seal Program. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 68, 2019.
Is there
I'll
a
make that
motion?
recommendation again.
Thank you, Mark. Second?
Second, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any questions for Larry? Hearing none, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
I should mention just for the audience that it seems like we're going through these public hearings, but they're always published in the Courier and notice is given well in advance, and our staff does a good job of making us aware of that, and it's in our packet. So thank you for all that public notice work. Item H.
Resolution number 36, 2019, establishing the City of Ottumwa's intent to enter into a development agreement with Chris Bro Hospitality for the construction of a Spring Hill Suites at Bridgeview Center. Presentation by Scott Hallgren and Andy Wartenberg. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 36, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second?
Second, Your Honor.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, Kevin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Honor. If it pleases the council, we'd like to have a presentation here by Scott Hallgren and Andy Wartenberg. They have put together some numbers and some facts and figures for council to consider before we get into general conversation about our resolution.
Okay. Good evening, Scott and Andy. You can go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, again, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members and the city team. Obviously, as this project has continued to evolve and move forward in our community, there's been lots of questions and great questions. And so over the last 2 weeks, Andy Wartenberg, our CVB director, and myself have sat down and worked hard to come up with some more concrete numbers and data on how this would directly impact both Bridgeview Center and our community. In the initial stages, when I looked at this, I thought a really fair way to come up with some good numbers is to look at really 3 case studies of 3 communities that I have some personal experience with, and that is Vicksburg, Mississippi, Bemidji, Minnesota, and Kennewick, Washington. I chose those 3 because they have similar sized buildings and or similar sized markets. There was a packet handed out that each of you should have, along with some of the city staff have, and there are pages in there that basically have some of the key statistics of the hotel and of the city and of the venue. And then also some comments shared from representatives in those communities. But first, real quickly, a few points on Kennewick, Washington. The Three Rivers Convention Center was opened in 2004. The Spring Hill Suites, it's a 116 room property, was connected and opened in 2015, 11 years later. Very similar timeline to where we are today with Bridgeview Center and the proposed Spring Hill Suites here in Ottumwa. In addition to the Spring Hill Suites, 3 other hotels opened in 2015, adding a total of 506 rooms to that particular market. New business has definitely been attributed to the hotel opening. Documented growth of 13 conventions and conferences from 2015 to 2018. And there's additional specific examples in the packets that were handed out to you earlier. The hotel tax increase, the community of Kennewick, Washington has seen a solid growth in their hotel motel tax since 2015. And there is a chart on page 3 of the document under Kennewick, Washington that shows the growth from 15 to 16 all the way through 2018 for all 3 of the communities that make up the Tri-Cities area. In addition to that, one key statistic and point out of Kennewick for the Three Rivers Convention Center is Corey Pearson, the executive director, took the best year prior to the hotel, and that was 2012, the best year financially for that venue, and their total revenue was $2.25 million. In 2018, their latest fiscal year that closed, that convention center saw $3.25 million in revenue, a $1 million growth in revenue from the hotel project. Now, that's not to say we're going to duplicate that exactly here in Ottumwa, and we're not even here to make that promise and even think we can come close. But even if we could look at 10 to 15 to 20, 25% of that, you'd see a positive impact to our income, excuse me, our revenue of anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. When you look at Vicksburg, Mississippi, again, a very similar sized market and similar sized venue. They have booked 15 events as a direct result of a new hotel that opened in June 2018. They just recently hosted 5,800 attendees for a state gymnastics tournament. That's a direct result of the new hotel. That event had direct spending of $812,000 in the community of Vicksburg, and that also had an economic impact of $1.38 million. I know there's been some discussion about how this would impact other hotel properties in our community. Some have used the word cannibalization. There's a quote in there from Annette Kirkland, the executive director, that talks about how the hotel, which is located only 1 block away from Vicksburg, has 117 rooms, and the spillover guests are spread out all over the city. They've had more collaborative partnerships, and they're at an all-time high in the community of Vicksburg. So how does that relate directly back to our community? As far as for projected increases in conferences and wedding receptions and conventions, Andy and I sat down and came up with what we believe is a very conservative estimate that by year 3 in fiscal year 2024, we would see an upward growth of 3 2.5 3-day conferences or conventions with 2-night stays, and a 1.5 to 2-day conference convention with a 1-night stay, and then also weddings. And then those numbers then grow a little bit 2 years later, 5 years into the project for fiscal year 2026, where again you see 4 and 3 and 6. So how does that translate to the bottom line of Bridgeview Center? When you look at the numbers, pulling out averages that we've seen from past events, and you look at rent, equipment revenue, and food and beverage revenue, just 2 line items, you would see about $125,000 total increase in revenue by year 3, and then you're upwards of $175,000 when you hit year 5 in 2026. And again, these are just simply today's dollars. These don't even factor in inflationary adjustments for price rental increases and food and beverage pricing. As we know, all of our costs obviously rise. We do increase our rates. But again, just a conservative estimate of today's dollars, how this may directly impact our bottom line. This is only looking at 3 types of events. This also does not include the positive impact we may see on corporate meetings and entertainment events and all the other special events we do. Andy?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, and thank you for the opportunity to address some of your questions. I'd like to talk about 3 things, and I will try and be brief. Number 1, I want to talk a little bit about cannibalization. It's a subject we've all discussed. Number 2, I want to talk a little bit about the economic impact of the hotel on the community. And number 3, I want to talk a little bit about sales and marketing. In researching cannibalization, I did a lot of research outside of Iowa, outside of Ottumwa, but I realized that we had an interesting example right here in Ottumwa. As all of us know, the Holiday Inn Express opened in December 2018. So I was curious in January, February of this month, is what effect it had on our other hotels. And I have a couple of interesting numbers here. The numbers you see there actually show what we got from the Iowa Department of Revenue. And you can see we had an increase in February 2019, 2018 of about 22%. And also our STR report, which I shared with a couple of members of the council, you can see that in January, our revenue was up. In February, our revenue was up. And I think more importantly, our occupancy was up in 2 months. Now, granted, this is a very, very small sample size, but it does show that, you know, because we introduce a new hotel into the market, it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be a decrease in revenue or a decrease in occupancy right there. I also wanted to look at some like communities in Iowa. I discussed this with some of our CVBs. You can see Bettendorf right there. I spoke with their CVB director. With all these, by the way, have convention centers with attached hotels. And you can see they estimated less than 10% in Bettendorf, less than 5% in Waterloo. And as a matter of fact, they're currently building 200 plus room properties under construction. But I think the most telling one is Council Bluffs for a couple of reasons. Mid-America Center opened in 2002. The Country Inn & Suites opened in 2005. Now, I talked to the CVB director there, who was Mark Ekman. And as most of you know, Mark has a good perspective on Ottumwa because he used to have my job. Now, Mark wasn't there at the time, but he said it was his understanding that there was no quantifiable effect. Since that hotel was built, they opened a Courtyard, a Spring Hill, and a Hilton Garden Inn, which shows that there may have been cannibalization. But on the other hand, Mark did mention that they are dealing with a little oversaturation right now. They say their occupancy is about 5% down. Also, I want to talk about a few things that may mitigate that cannibalization. I know the council was given a number of about 30%. Number one, obviously, is the incremental demand. If we're have a conference with 300 people and our Spring Hill property is 96 rooms, obviously, they're going to want to go. They're going to have to stay somewhere else. Right now, our room inventory is about 613 rooms. So. Price points, we really have 2 tiers of price points in Ottumwa in our hotels. We have a rack rate of, say, Holiday Inn, Holiday Inn Express, Hampton Inn, and maybe Spring Hill if it's built, you know, maybe 120, 130. And then some of our other properties are more in the 80, 79 to 90 range. There is not a lot of price elasticity from folks that are staying at the cheaper hotels moving to the other. And also remember that when you talk about cannibalization, we're assuming a flat demand. Okay, we shouldn't assume that. If you look at the study that was done by HMI, they projected demand of about a 3.1% increase. Obviously, when I talk about sales and marketing, I'll talk about how we can drive that demand even more. You can see the numbers from iowaworks.gov on employment. But finally, I think this is a very important item right here, is the idea of brand loyalty. I mean, all of us here go to conferences, meetings, or when we go on vacation, we look for our brand. You know, whether we have points, we like that brand, whatever. And Right now in Ottumwa, we have a Hilton, we have IHG, and we have a Wyndham brand. And Spring Hill Suites would give us a Marriott brand. But look at the study right here. A Cornell University School of Hotel Administrative study. They looked at 1,300 hotels in Texas. They wanted to see what the effect would be of new properties coming into a market on existing properties. And there was cannibalization, but it was almost double for like properties. What I mean by that, like if they brought in a Hilton, there was double the cannibalization for another Hilton brand than there was for a competing brand such as a Marriott. So the bottom line here is I believe there will be cannibalization. I think we're foolish to think that there won't be. But based on these factors and also that we're going to work very hard to drive that demand, I believe that cannibalization, I estimate, will be 10% or lower. Second issue that's been brought up, we've been discussed with me, is what is the impact, the economic impact of this hotel going to be for the city of Ottumwa? This study was done, a comprehensive report, HMI. And by the way, the economic impact studies that I'm going to talk about are all in your packets right here. But I think the problem with this study is that it was submitted along with the request for an RFP. It's a very comprehensive study. I know some of the members of the council have gone through it. But I don't think it addresses what it's going to do for the hotel. It doesn't address what it's going to do for the community. Now, as you may recall from my last update, we are now using an economic impact model to forecast the economic impact of festivals, events, things like that. The model is in place. We work with the University of Iowa, and these are some of the things we get from that. It occurred to me that we could use this to project the economic impact of a tour, a conference, or a wedding. And I reached out to the gentleman who did this, and I said, can I do this? He said, absolutely. But the normal model relies on survey data. They said all you need to do is estimate what a person at a conference would spend on hotels, on meals, on gas, on things like that. So we got together, myself and the Bridgeview team, and we estimated what a conference person would spend on a hotel, on food and beverage in Bridgeview, food and beverage outside of Bridgeview, gas, amenities, things like that. And what we were able to do was come up with some very interesting numbers. And we did it, by the way, I want to emphasize to everybody here is please, 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 if you have some time, come by my office so I can walk you through the model. I mean, it's a fantastic model, and I can also show you the numbers I used to estimate. But basically, these are the numbers we came up with per conference, and you can see for a 3-day, 2-night, total direct expenditures, I think some of the important variables there. Additional dollars spent, $61,000. Look at the hotel tax revenue. And then the last number on the bottom there is the community impact. And that's the 61,000 plus a conservative multiplier effect of 1.45. So that would be direct, indirect, and induced expenditures right there. So this is what we estimate the economic impact would be for a 3-day, 2-night conference, a 2-day, 1-night, and for a wedding. So if you take those numbers and we multiply those by Scott's numbers right there. And again, I agree with Scott. I think these numbers are conservative. You can see what we project on the bottom line there, the impact in fiscal year 2026 right there. And again, all the data from the surveys is in your package right there. Last thing I want to talk about is sales and marketing. It is my belief, and I've had many conversations, that the worst thing that we can do is approve this hotel and then believe that if we build it, that they will come. We must have a plan to actively sell this hotel. Now, I think there are a lot of ways to go on this. We could spend a lot of money with an outside consultant and do a strategic plan or a marketing plan. But you know what? I think what we need to do is an active, engaged sales plan. And if you look at the last page of your packets, I have a 9-point sales plan. I won't go through all points with you. I just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, I propose we have a sales task force, And what that would be is a representative from CVB, a representative from Bridgeview, a representative from Chrisbro, and a representative from the city. This task force would meet once a week, and I'll go through some of the other points right there. I think this is absolutely urgent. I will tell you, when I was at the Iowa Tourism Conference, the regional manager for Chrisbro reached out to me, and we had a great conversation. But let's be honest here. If they have a sales manager in place, their job is to fill up their hotel. It's not to have an impact on our community. So we need to engage them and have this task force. We will utilize number 3 CRM, which is like Salesforce management. We will optimize leads. And our meetings are not going to be about strategic planning. I would think we would require every weekly meeting that we have leads that we generate. We prioritize those leads. We figure out the best sales cycle. And then we move down to number 7. And again, this is outlined in your packets, digital advertising. I believe that we would need no more than $10,000 per year for advertising. Remember, a lot of the things we do are digital right now. And another important point of the sales plan is number 8. It's what I call community asset integration. And what I mean by that is a big part of what we would do is to get out in the community, have those tours organized, have those dine around organized. And it's important for 2 reasons. When you're selling a group, you're not just selling the venue, the hotel, you're selling the destination. And also that will ensure that some of those dollars from those group are coming back in the community. Last thing I want to say is there's been a question put to me about how's the CVB going to do this? Are you asking for extra funding to do this? The answer to that is no. If you review the sales plan, this is basically a question of shifting our time resources and focusing more on selling this. But if you take nothing away from my presentation, I think it is absolutely urgent that we put this sales plan in place. And again, I would invite all members of the council of the city to stop by, talk about the sales plan, see how we can refine it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
And take any questions.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open it to the council, and I'd like to suggest that we do 1 question each so everybody gets a chance, and so we don't dominate with any one thought or pattern. So who would like to be first and raise some questions or ask some questions?
I'll go. We just go down.
Go ahead,
We'll just
Holly.
start here and go down the line. So I guess since Andy, thank you first of all, and Scott for all your work on gathering that information. I think it answers a lot of questions. I think we still have more questions, but thank you so much for gathering all that data and all the hard work that you've done to make us more informed and give us some at least good guesstimates, well-informed guesstimates on those. The one question I guess I'll start out with, since you're already at the podium, is with the sales plan, has there been, and it might be a question for Kevin kind of, is Chrisbro on board with the sales plan as presented? I know, Kevin, I had asked about that previously and didn't have a lot of info on that and how it would work in the development agreement. So I guess one thing I'd have is I think it's a good step forward on that sales plan, but ensuring that that's something that will indeed happen.
Yes, I have spoken with Chrisbro, and they have a couple of different models, of course, how they do their operations. In some cases, they run both facility and they run hospitality as well. But yeah, they look forward to working with our partners, and they feel like it would be a fruitful partnership.
Will that be conveyed in the development agreement? I mean, ensuring that that is in there to, confirm that is how things will happen.
We don't really have it in our development agreement as such. We have elements relating to our lease agreement, of course, where we'll be releasing the facility, the property for the facility. And we also have some indication to flag. If there's a change in flag, then the city council would have final approval on that and sign off on that, not, of course, unreasonably withholding that approval if it were a comparable change to make. But we don't have operational aspects in that development agreement, really. It's more about the development of the facility and the things that are entertained by that. Oh, go ahead.
Mark, go ahead.
I also had one comment. I did have a conversation with, her name is Laura Watkins. She's the Director of Convention Sales for the Tri-Cities Convention Center. And we just talked about how they do market their community in the hotel. And she basically told me they spend very little time selling the hotel because what they're focused for is they want to bring those multi-day pieces of business and even one-day meetings, but out of town and guests into their community. And if they get those events booked at the Three Rivers Convention Center, they're automatically staying at the attached hotel. Now, of course, we want to have them as part of our team because if we have that group effort, that's only going to be a win-win for everybody. But I mean, and Kennewick's not the only city that's shared that either. But basically, if we do our jobs in selling and filling up Bridgeview Center, they're going to stay at that hotel. And then they're going to spill out from that hotel into others.
Go ahead, Mark.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for answering a lot of questions. I know to date I've sent out about 5 pages worth of questions to various staff members and stakeholders. So I want to thank everybody for that, especially Andy Wartenberg and Steve Dust and Scott Hallgren, not to mention all the various staff members. So we have gotten a lot of responses in so far. One of the questions that I do have, this is a lot of information that's really good, that's going to take some time to unpack, but my question moreover is for Bob at this point, Bob J. How do we, there's going to be a differential in the time period before we actually start getting the monies in from the property taxes. How do we finance that as a city until that point comes?
That will probably be done with a loan from the general fund to the Westgate TIF district, and then it will be repaid over the period of time of, it'll actually be repaid the next year if we wanted to capture those taxes, so.
Okay, so my big question then is, knowing what we've got going forward, how big of a hit is that going to be to the general fund?
About 18 to 20 cents for every dollar.
Okay.
That we capture.
So it's going to be fairly significant then.
That is not, and it'll be a one-time thing because the following year the taxes will go in and then we'll capture them. So there'll be a wash situation there.
Okay. And just so we're clear on this, this is by the addition that was on the staff summary. We're talking about roughly a $5.1 million project, all said and done, after we consider the rebate or the grant from the Legacy Foundation. Is that correct?
3.5, 4.5, yeah, probably 5 something.
Okay. So I guess my last question, and this might be a multi-part question. This is a staff recommendation. Do you recommend this project to go forward?
I'm not going to offer anything like that. That's not my job to do that. I think we should probably be looking to see what questions they have in reference to the development agreement before you proceed any farther. I mean, if there's something that they want to put in there and we can't live with, what are you going to do? That's just my 2 cents. So,
Okay, Councilman Delby.
Well, again, I'd echo everybody else's sentiments. I appreciate the work you guys have put into getting us this information. I know this is a huge project, and it's come on rather quickly. I know a lot of the private meetings have gone on for quite some time, but to get the stamp of approval, this has been thrown at us pretty quickly. But you've done an excellent job, Scott and Andy and Kevin, and of course, my hats off to Steve Dust. We'd had a conversation about it too, and so I appreciate that. I think we need time. I would say, and I would agree with Councilman Rowe. I remain supportive of the project without a doubt, but I think we've got a lot of stuff here to, like he said, unpack and look at, and maybe come up with some questions, and maybe have a meeting, Andy, with you to go over that model that you talked about. But I do remain supportive of it, and I know one of the things that that's concerning us all on the financing end of it, we've got a lot of unknowns ahead of us. We've got a streetscape project on the agenda for this year, actually. And we've got a line energy increase that will directly impact the city's general fund. So I know there's a lot of uncertainty out there about it, but I do, like I said, I remain supportive of it. And I guess the thing that I'm hanging on to here is that if a private company such as Chrisbro would be putting a massive amount of money, such as $10 million on the line to take a risk on, I know the ask from the city is not small, but I think that does play well to say that they're in it to make it successful. And I think we need to look at ways to make Bridgeview even better. And so with that, I remain supportive unless something in the agreement comes back that isn't something we can do. Again, I appreciate everybody's work on it, and I really don't have any questions. I may after I look through some of this information, but thank you for your time again for doing that for us.
Councilman Stevens.
Yeah, just a couple questions. On the parking issues, there is no, as I understand it, no designated parking. I talked to Kevin about this. No designated parking for the hotel itself. What if there's a gun show going on and you have a convention and the parking lot's full and somebody that's staying in the hotel has to go down by the beach and park and walk up to the hotel? That just, I don't know. I don't understand that. That sounds like that's going to be very inconvenient.
Yeah, and most of our discussions so far, the primary locates for the new parking additions would be the south lot, as we're calling it, which is the presently graveled lot to the south of the parking lot at BVC, and the west lot, which is west of Church Street, right there, just about half that lot. And we, as you all know, we kind of changed, we altered the orientation of the building slightly, about 30 to 35 degrees to line up with existing parking. We feel like that's going to create a little more parking adjacent to the future hotel locate. And Bridgeview Center, before we were estimating, or the developer was estimating around 232. I think privately, our discussions were lowering that number a little bit just to be conservative. But I think we may have picked up a line of parking, which I'm not sure how many spots that would be, probably 20 to 30 in a line. And you're looking at about 110, maybe, I believe, at those other two locations, roughly. So, 220, we're pushing around 450. I think presently we're looking at 353. So we're picking up around 100 spots. It is a concern. The site is pinholed in where it's at. You're very limited by what you have in infrastructure around it. But we were also, I think, discussing secondary overflow east of the Jefferson Street Bridge as well. So, and there will be an entrance coming, if you're walking, pedestrians walking from the east going west into the hotel, there will be closed vestibule entrance there to come in from the east side. So although it's not the best approach, but there's any number of parking spots we could handle without affecting any operations in that east side lot, probably 2 to 250, I think. So
I understand that there's going to be lots of parking spaces, but my question was, if I'm going to a motel, hotel, I want to park nearby. Yeah. I don't want to walk half a mile to get to it. And that was my question.
Yes, the required parking spots for the hotel essentially would be 96, and we'll be waiving that if we do this project, of course, because all parking will be ad hoc. It will be all public. We are not leasing any parking area to the developer.
Developer okay with that?
They are.
Okay, my second.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Councilman Stevens, just one thought, and I'm probably out of everyone, I'm the most worried about parking because I deal with those comments every single day at Bridgeview Center. But one thing we look at when we have multiple events too is if you look at the hotel's certainly going to have corporate travel in it. That's going to be one of their focuses. And most corporate travel are not arriving at the hotels till 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And then if we have business during the day, whether that's a conference, if it's a weekend, a gun show, or if it's a corporate meeting, those guests are usually departing Bridgeview Center maybe between 4, 5, 6 o'clock. So what I believe is yes, we will have some more parking. There are chances that the case that you brought up could happen, but I just think you're going to see the lot at Bridgeview Center busier than it is now more often.
I hope so.
On the overnight, you're going to have the parking lot full with the overnight guests. But if they're a business traveler, they're usually departing usually prior to 8 a.m., maybe before, say, a conference or before another event would start. So you'll just see some of that, more in and out traffic, and a lot just be fuller at more times. In addition to that, what we're hopeful for, if we have guests staying at that hotel that are doing business at Bridgeview Center, then they just park once and then they're there. They don't have to move their car, and then they're just walking to and from their meetings. So then we don't have those extra guests coming in.
My second question is, and I talked to Kevin a little bit about this too, is the assessed value somewhere around, what did you say, 7 million?
Yes, in discussions with the assessor, 7.3 million post rollback, that would equate to $6.57 million.
They're okay with this?
We have some upcoming discussions about that, actually, with the tax assessment, but they're going to have to be okay with that as far as how the project will work. We have to be able to bring in enough revenue as a city through our TIF mechanism to be able to make this payment within our 20-year window.
Yeah.
That would be the case if we're issuing, as we're doing here, issuing bonds.
I understand what you're saying, but to the best of my knowledge, what little bit of information I've gathered, the rest of the hotels in Ottumwa are valued considerably less than that. And I wondered if Chris Bro would bulk on that assessment.
Yeah, we do have a considerably aged stock of hotels. If you look at it, most of our hotels are a little bit older and don't assess very high. It's true. Hotels generally in the state of Iowa don't assess very high as they do in many states. But I believe the new Holiday Inn and Suites is coming on around, I think 4+, maybe 4.2 to 4.5 million will be the assessment for that. However, if you look at it, when I was discussing this with our county assessor, Gary says, well, you have to consider what you're looking at. You have a little bit higher end hotel with the Marriott. It's connected to Bridgeview Center on possibly what is the most, besides the piece of property that we're all standing on right now, probably the most valuable piece of property in the city. So it is a different kind of project. It's not a standalone bar, bistro, several different kinds of amenities, including connectivity to what is a premier location and event venue in the city. So it is going to be worth more generally. I don't think anybody's going to jump up and down about having double a tax assessment of anybody else, but we also did not have any deals with any other hotels that would compel any kind of a minimum tax assessment agreement. So we did not incentivize those hotels. So developers come into these projects understanding there's going to be mechanisms at hand and that there's going to have to be a way to work that out.
Are we going to have this in writing?
We are. That's going to be in your development agreement because you're going to have your minimum assessment agreement in there. That's going to guarantee that post rollback number of 6.57 for the term of the project note for the 20-year term. Now, after that, there will be an adjustment in that assessment, I'm sure. Of course, at that point, the hotel itself would be 20 years old, and one would expect that there would be such an adjustment.
Should we be waiting to vote on this till we get all of those in writing?
Well, that's a good question. And I got the schedule before me here. And basically, we were kind of imagining this as a kickoff meeting to kind of initiate into our process. April 16th, our next meeting will be setting a time and date for a public hearing for consideration of our urban renewal area amendment. As everyone has seen from that schedule, we'll be setting the time and date for May 21st. And now at that meeting in May 21st, if everything goes well with this project, we would be doing three things that night in order. We would be approving the urban renewal area amendment, which would make this project possible, as well as some build grant and other things that we've been looking at in our Westgate TIF district. And we would also, after that, be affirming the development agreement, including the minimum assessment agreement and all the other inclusions in that. And after that, we would be affirming our lease agreement for the property that the hotel would be on. So the answer to that question is, do you have to do this resolution tonight? I would say no. There's nothing that mandates that happen. City Attorney Keith and I, in discussion, felt like it was a good idea to indicate our political and community commitment to the project at this point, because there will be substantial amounts of money that we're starting to incur on both sides, working through the various considerations here. I will say that we have a meeting. I have a meeting with Steve Dust, with our developer, Thursday. where we'll be discussing the language that's in our development agreement. We've started that back and forth. As you guys know, we did send that agreement to them. So hopefully we can bring some finality to that then. But no, I would say it's not mandatory. You could push that till April 16th. I would say it would be however ideal.
It would be what?
It would, however, be ideal that we make that commitment as soon as we feel comfortable to do so, as soon as it is to the pleasure of council.
Okay. Councilman Strebe.
It's tough to be last here. I, along with the other council members, want to thank Andy and Scott and you, Kevin, for all the hard work you put in on this. It seems like since we were here last time, you guys have amassed a lot of data and a lot of information and numbers, and we greatly appreciate that. Those are the types of, that's the hard information that we need to look at when we make a big decision like this. We can't, I don't think any of us can say that we're not concerned about the money, and with the money put out for a project like this, we have to think about the return on our investment and how that all goes together. And so, I shared Skip's concerns that he asked you about, and fundamentally I agree with Councilman Delby that I support this project theoretically. But back to, what Holly said, Councilman Berg, I think that's where it kind of took my question there. And that's where we can talk about a third party coming in and not really necessarily having be the betterment of Ottumwa as one of their primary goals. And we can take Scott's considerations into play. If we have a lot of venues here, then people are going to stay in the hotel. And both of those things are true. But I think for this to be optimized again, the sales plan that you talked about, Andy, since we can't get it in writing, that's sort of a nebulous thing. Like, those have to do with interpersonal communications and conversations between parties and entities that are, that maybe can establish some sort of common ground, even if fundamentally their business model doesn't have that embedded into it. Like, I think that's really where we're going to see bigger successes, is if we can have that coordination, if we can have those relationships be built so that we can get the most out of this project.
Yeah, and I should say I didn't want to give any indication that it wasn't, quote, built into their model per se. There's several locations that they do operate with other facilities, they said, and they get along quite well, and it's quite a productive relationship. So, but that is a real concern. I mean, I think that's chief of all our concerns, is that if we do this project, is it feasible? I think we've demonstrated that fiscally it is feasible for the city to do, but certainly operationally, that's the big thing. Right after we get done with this, it has to work. So that'll be the key part of whether or not that does work. And I believe that we can make that happen.
Andy, you were going to make a comment?
I do, Councilman Stevens. I think it's a really good point. This is all well and good, this sales plan, but if they don't participate on this task force, it's definitely going, it's going to water down the purpose of the sales task force. However, having worked on both sides, on the hotel side and the CVB, one of the most frustrating things that hotels often have when they're trying to market to groups is getting the cooperation of the CVB. And there is no guarantee, but it is really in their interest to be on this task force with us, because we are basically saying to you, we are going to help you do your job. It's as simple as that. And you are going to help us do our job, which is to benefit the community there. As I said, my initial conversation with the regional sales manager of Chris Pro I went away feeling very positive, but you're right, there are no guarantees, but I think it is in their best interest to work with us.
Absolutely. And I think with you and the work that you've done already and the commitment that you've showed us, our chances are better than they would be. So thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Kevin, some clarification, please. My understanding from looking at the material tonight, this is a intent to enter into a development agreement. We do not have a final development agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct. We'll be meeting with the developer on Thursday to Steve Dust and I will.
Who is we?
Steve Dust and I are going to meet with the developer down at Legacy.
And any
Thursday.
council member could be a part of that? As long as we don't have a quorum.
Well, that's certainly, I don't know if I would suggest that. That could happen. That's not normally the case, just because of basically if any one council member is there, how does that make the developer feel? It's almost like having your attorney there. I don't want to single Johnny out, but it's scary when you have your attorney. It can be scary when a council person is there. It will if a council person is there. It's going to affect the dialogue. That's for sure. Okay. And it's going to limit the dialogue in a way that it would not be the case if an elected official wasn't there. There's a certain weight in a meeting when elected officials or an attorney are present.
So go back over your time schedule. If we vote this up or down tonight, you're saying we have plenty of time, but I thought I was starting from the goalposts and going backwards that we want to do, if we pass this, we wanted to do some construction yet this year. And that presents a real problem in my thinking if we postpone. And since we don't have a final agreement, it would be possible for council to look at a new development agreement in the second meeting or the first meeting in May and still have plenty of time to make some decisions or change some things. We're not setting anything in concrete tonight. We're just saying we're interested, we want to proceed.
Yes, we're making what tonight is this intent to enter into development agreement is a political and community dedication to a process and to project. That's what it is. It's an indication to that developer that yes, we have a strong intent to make this work, and we really haven't made such a dedication. We've just been nibbling around the edges, and so we felt like since we are getting into what is going to be major, more expenditures of money, but they're going to be bringing in their engineer, doing some platinum surveys for us to delineate areas down there, like our area to be leased for location of building to inside a curb and such, that it would be most appropriate that we make that connection to process and project that says, you know what, our community is in. We're gonna prosecute this project with you. Okay. But no, it's not binding. It's a non-binding resolution that indicates intent.
Okay. Councilor, are there any other questions you want to ask?
Yes, I have a few more if that's okay. I didn't want to do them all at once. Give everybody else time. So, Kevin, one thing you had mentioned before was CRISPR doing their own independent feasibility study and had said that'd be coming out soon. And that was kind of a conversation piece that we were looking for moving forward. When would we be able to see that, or if it's out?
You're right. And I would hope that we'd have that by now. We haven't. I'm going to talk to them about Thursday and see how far out that is. It's been about 5 to 6 weeks. And ours, when we did it, took about 5 to 6 weeks. We got it back in 6 weeks. So I think it is very important that we see that too. And I'm hoping to get that. I can't imagine we don't get that by the end of next week. And I'm hoping I get it Thursday from the developer. It may yet. They didn't have it Monday. But to your point, that is, we really need to see that. There's going to be a lot of indication in there as to what are some of our concerns with cannibalizing revenues and such. And also just feasibility, or where are we at now that we're looking at this facility, we built the other one and it's finished, where are we at in stock, right? Do we have enough hotels after we build this hotel, for instance?
Sorry, I've got a couple. I was also wondering, I think Andy and Scott gave a lot of great comparisons on kind of what the pros are on after it's built. But I was curious if there are any comparables for these projects that show how much public investment there was in these private projects. I did some just, Google research on my own, looking at cities and how much they're investing percentage-wise in these projects. So I was wondering if you had done any research to know, is this amount of money from a city a reasonable amount or not?
You find a lot of differences when you go around to different cities, and it's important to look at apples and apples instead of apples and bananas or oranges, because every city is different. Our attorney made a good point. Nathan made a good point when we were in discussion, and it was like I said, I just feel like we have to to an extent, cities like ourselves have to buy things to such an extent. And he said that's the reason for TIF, you know, and at the point of where you don't have to buy something is when you don't need to use TIF anymore, but that's the purpose of TIF. So the answer to your question is, I've seen it all over the place, and I've seen there are a lot of different kinds of combinations, like not just one thing, but a little bit of motel, hotel, a little bit of sales tax, a little bit of TIF. So it's kind of all over the map. Personally, do I feel like that this is a good deal for us? I think as far as affordability goes, $3.5 million. And we're looking in this case at the city's total reveal on that being about 2.5 plus interest, plus maybe another 800 for the parking. That's where our estimate is now, our latest estimate, which is our most accurate because we've been running numbers on that parking and you guys saw the change there. You know, I think you've got to look at it like how important is the hotel to your community and what is going to be the long-term impact of that facility to your community to say whether or not this is worth it to me. Do I wish that this were more like a rebatement kind of thing? I know that most of the time when we're working with projects like this as city folks, we like to see these things be rebatements because they're so much cleaner and they don't have us having to make adjustments to fill gaps like for the first year or so, such as Bob suggested there, where you're borrowing from one fund to another but paying it back. You're having to make adjustments, and it's a little bit more, it is a little bit more of a risk, and it's a little bit more of challenging when you look at doing it like we're doing it, where we're bonding for this. Our money is last in on this project. I want to make that explicitly clear. Yes, we're borrowing up front, but we have substantial completion in our contract. So that means they'll be painting the parking spots in the area surrounding this facility before we let loose of any money here. They'll be finished virtually with the project when they receive our funding. And that's important for our guarantee here. But I do feel like it's worth it in the position that Ottumwa's in at $3.5 million. I don't think that is a bad deal quote. I think that's a good deal because we're the regional leader. This is regional facility, but we are hamstrung in this facility in reaching our full potential with it without having a stay component, a hospitality component with it. And I think this is going to change the entire aspect of that area right there, which is essentially an extension of downtown. And I myself as a planner see that in the future, some elements around where this facility is could possibly turn commercial. You see with east side of Jefferson, that's a possibility at some point when other projects in the future were to take place and move fields elsewhere. We have that. We've seen that playing with the River Renaissance. I think this is, this is the cap on top of what Bridgeview represents for the community. And your overall revenues, sales tax impact, bringing people into communities. There are intangible gains that you get from bringing water and sewer and DNR and DOT and different kinds of private events, StormCon, Concrete Con, all these different conventions and conferences. There's an intangible that you can't know, but you could end up having businesses start in this community, come to this community, and bring major job production because you have this facility. And you're never going to get those kinds of conferences or conventions without a hotel. And I think this hotel brings to bear some things that we are missing, not just architecturally and whatnot and stay, but functionality and future potential.
Thanks. I also was curious, we talked in just an informational meeting, but wanted to still raise the concern regarding the positioning of the hotel and what it means to connectivity to our business districts. Obviously, as a city, we want to see this generating revenue, not just for Bridgeview Center, but for everybody, other hotels, other restaurants and businesses. And, the current proposed site of the hotel is very much in a sea of parking, not connected to, not really creating an invitation to connect to our other business districts. And so I was wanting to talk about that and if there's been additional consideration on that.
Well, I mean, when we looked at the project originally with the developer, we were talking, myself and a few others in the developer. The developer gave us the suggestion of location that they felt professionally was the most advantageous to the operations. I think in my report you read what was probably I would hope that it was inspirational, but maybe not. But there were some comments to the architectural wonder that would be represented by the more obtuse angle with these two buildings coming together. I didn't mean that in a facetious manner. That's actually true on an architectural level. The wider angle that we're creating here and the connectivity between a middle part of a building with two other larger structures is going to be quite architecturally pleasing, so to speak. And there's no way, when you look at the direct in approach to the building, when you walk in the buildings like this, you want to make that introduction of the pedestrian or the clientele. You make the introduction in the best manner you can, and you avail someone of all of the facility directions to facilities and primary uses to the best extent that you can. And that's how we're introducing people coming from the west into the east like that, because it's front facade, it's drive approach, captured area for courtyard. So you're under vestibule, cover. I'm going to go in and get the rooms while it's raining. You're under cover. This was the best way to organize the site that made the most sense commercially, operationally, architecturally. And also with the entrance into the actual structure that's existing, we're dealing with an as-built situation too. And that stairway and everything, where we're entering the building is the best way to make it kind of work with fluid motion.
Andy, did you have some
comment on that?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. One thing I really didn't touch on is when we talk about the sales process, I think there's also an after sales process. When we sign that contract with the meeting planner, I think it's very incumbent on the CVB to make sure and do something unique and something maybe out of the box to make sure that all the attendees are aware of the amenities that are available in the community outside of the convention right there. So I just wanted to say that I think there is a sales process, but there's also an after sales process. And we brainstorm and we figure out a plan on how we can encourage the attendees to, if they have a free night, to go out into the community. So
I just think, thank you for that. I think it's important to really think about the aesthetic. We're looking at Riverfront Renaissance programs going further than this. We're looking at development in the park. I think we just want to ensure that the design of this and the placement of it fits into the greater scheme, and that it fits, and that we ensure that we're creating that connectivity, whether incentivizing connectivity, or I think we need to really look at that design and look at how it's going to fit in to the rest of what we're trying to accomplish. One last question.
I think that's
promise.
absolutely true.
So that my last question was for Bob J. Looking at this bonding or the proposed bonding, where does that put our bonding capacity if another project comes about that we also think is an important? Where are we at? Are we nearing the end of our bonding capacity if we take on this
we've got
project?
plenty of capacity.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
That's it. Thank you.
I'd also like to make a comment on that bonding capacity. We were calling around today just to check around a little bit. And of course, members have heard me throw around that most cities that are doing anything in the state of Iowa are 40 to 60% in their bonding capacity. And I do think that's true on average. It was true a few years ago. It probably generally remains to be true. But probably 70% of the cities in the state of Iowa are less than 2,000 people. So if you take that dynamic out, because those cities don't tend to bond a whole lot, if you take that dynamic out, that it's going to change the numbers a little bit. When you look at the averages, per capita debt, some of the highest cities in the state in per capita debt, this was from a study that was pointed out in the Des Moines newspaper. The lowest of the top 10, the first in the top 10 was actually Coralville at per capita 13,607, which is a pretty high number. The lowest of the top 10 per capita for debt was Postville with 4,847. Now, presently at the 45% capacity, I think that we're going to be at the turn of our new fiscal year, we're at 45%. That represents about 1,050 for our city per capita debt. If you added $10 million of that, it would be about 1,459. That's just a comparison on the per capita numbers. Burlington currently, with a population of about where we're at, is at 69.7%. Fort Dodge, 24,305 people there, is 50.9%. Waukee, hold on to your seats, at 20,649 is at 80.8%. Now, personally, having run a couple cities and been involved in government for some time, if you breach 70%, you're in the red zone. That is for sure true. I inherited a city once. It was around 93%. Within 3 years, a city of around 10,000. Within 3 years, we were at around 48%. So, yeah, but you get above 70. But at 45, and also when you look at, I think in conversation, I've intimated this from some of the conversations listening to Bob and stuff, but our long-term debt outlook is pretty good because our debt, so some portions, a good portion of our debt falls out for the next 10 to 15 years. Is that not true, Bob? 10 years, a good fair portion of our debt falls off or is retired. So our long-term debt outlook is very good, and our capacity is highly appreciable for a city that's actually accomplishing things as we are.
Mark? I just wanted to touch back on one thing that you had said, Mayor, about this just being the vote of intent. And I guess from my perspective, I would, since again we got a lot of information tonight, that's going to need to be digested by the council. And one of the things that has hung up on me for the last few minutes is a question that Council Member Stevens actually asks is what happens if they don't accept that assessment? And that's going to be important going forward, very obviously. So I guess I came in here tonight thinking one thing, and I'm probably leaving thinking another thing, but knowing that this is just a vote of intent, and we have time to digest this and ask more questions and actually see what Chris Bro is going to agree upon. I guess this has my support tonight, but I will be curious to see that they actually do agree to that valuation.
Yeah, and what is it? A wise man once said, always be prepared to walk away. I think you do always need to be prepared to walk away from something if it's not going to be to your best interest. I don't think that they have much of a decision if they want to develop here, and they have indicated they want to. We have to have a mechanism that makes it work, or we have to come up with an alternative. And it was our developers' wish that our window be a little smaller to begin with. Now we've come up with what essentially is the smallest window on a project like this you're going to see, obviously. But we have maybe another couple of options if the developer doesn't like the way that this mechanism is set up and has to work. But that'd be it. And of course, we would have that discussion. I think we're probably going to end up having that discussion in some elemental fashion on Thursday.
Okay, and the last question that I do want to ask, the last time that this question was posed, there was an exponential raise in prices. Are we fairly confident, and maybe this is a question that should have been asked when Larry was here, so maybe my bad, but are we fairly solid on the numbers as they're presented right now?
We are. Our first estimate of the parking spot, I was going to pull that up there. Our first estimate of our parking lots, our 2 parking lots, was $700,000. That was an initial estimate without our engineering being done. And I think we came in at more like around $744,000 on that, not including replacing the horseshoe ring. I think that came up to around 17.3 or 17.5. So yeah, we weren't too far off, and I don't know if I'd say exponential on that number. Less than 10% is not necessarily exponential, but yes, it was our first estimate.
Your definition of small and mine evidently are two different things. But
well, being from the development world, we could we could debate that. But yeah, we do feel like we have accurate estimates now. We've done some engineering on that, and we know everything I think that we need to know now, being in the sense that if we decide to do something with parking in the Jefferson Street area, you kind of make your own decision there what you want to spend, because you have this open area that isn't being used. Do I gravel half of it? Do I gravel all of it? You could, for what money you have to spend, you could make whatever decision that you wanted to about what you wanted to spend over there. So,
okay, thank you.
May I ask one more question?
Certainly.
This 17,000 that you're talking about for the horseshoe arena, what does that consist of?
That is a magnificent horseshoe arena indeed, but it would exist of horseshoe throwing locates, approximately, I think there's 8 to 10 of them over there, and boxes with sand in them.
You talking, this is for moving them?
Yes, and relocating it at a different spot.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other? Matt? No. Victor? Well,
Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Just a couple. I know you're tired of hearing from me. Just a couple things, to finalize comments. I think, before we move forward, things that I'd like to hopefully see before the development agreement is the feasibility study, and ensuring that we have plenty of time to digest that before moving forward. Ensuring that we have something in some sort of agreement, formal or otherwise, about the sales, how sales will work at the hotel. And I think we also, or I shouldn't say we, me, would like to see a more defined plan on the parking lots and how that's going to work, and knowing that we have a good plan on how everything is going to be juxtaposed in this area. And those things would make me a lot more comfortable when we move forward with the next step.
Again, I want to clarify for the council's benefit, this is an intent to enter into an agreement. We are not entering into an agreement tonight. And if you look at the information that the staff has supplied to us, the actual development agreement would be presented on May 21st.
It would, Your Honor.
So that gives us, approximately 6 weeks. And I think your comment that you're going to be visiting with the developer this week, and hearing all the comments and the concerns the council has, I think you can certainly bring those to their attention. And the other thing I think is important for the council is Kevin is not doing this by himself. He and Joni Keith, our city attorney, have also been in contact with Ehlers and Cooney, our bonding attorneys, to develop this development agreement. So again, I think if you put in all the concerns you've heard tonight, what we want to do is move this project forward. We don't want to stop it or delay it. If you come back and on the 21st of May, you say, we don't like the development agreement, then I think you vote your conscience and say yay or nay. This is just to move the project forward and to say, keep working on it. There are a lot of things that, as we have seen, whether it's parking, positioning, funding, assessment, all those factors are extremely important, but those are not going to be set forth tonight. That's just the intent that we want to keep this project alive. I think it's important. We've been talking about a hotel at Bridgeview for 20 years. I went back and looked at when the first discussion came up. It's time we either do something, because another developer, I don't think, will look at it some way if we don't keep moving ahead on this. It's a matter of, are we going to invest in our own future? So I just say that to you as a council, and feel it is an important statement to the developer. Are we interested in moving forward? And if we can certainly look at the timetable and have other options, you still have plenty of time to digest the material, to talk to our staff and get some additional clarification. And then we come back on the 21st and vote it up or down.
I would agree, Your Honor. The May 21st is a tight spot too. We need to be aware of that we're talking about August 1st beginning. We would still have to do a June meeting of the BOA to do our waiving on the reading or waiving of the parking, and a June 17th probably meeting with our planning department, planning commission, to approve the site plan for this project. So we're on a tight schedule. We've been moving along though, and we don't feel like it's going to take too much more work. I would also say that Joni Keith has been very helpful and a partner in this thing. So has Nathan, so has Steve Dust, and the other guys on the team that we had assembled. There was a lot of folks in the beginning, but when it comes down to the end here, we have been meeting with the developer quite a bit. Steve and I have met with them, and Joni and I have been talking to Nathan, and so a lot of the work really has kind of been done. We have spent some money, but we've got a lot more to go. I appreciate council's patience during the prosecution of this project. Sometimes there are a lot of moving targets. I know that can be frustrating, but this incentive amount is not going to go down. It has went down to get where it is. It started off at 4, now we're at 3.5. But thank you again for your patience.
Okay, are you ready to vote? The recommendation is to pass and adopt Resolution 36, 2019, which was in your packet, and I would again encourage you to look at that. You've had a lot of good questions. You've raised a lot of good issues. I think we're ready to vote. So take the roll, please.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council, for that. Okay, let's keep moving.
Resolution number 61, 2019, adopt the disposal of surplus city property policy number 69, effective April 2nd, 2019. Recommendation, pass and adopt resolution number 61, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
And Andy, or you or Joni taking this? I got it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, on this one, this is an item that I discussed at the previous council meeting with council members, and this is specific to surplus property and how the city would sell or convey that. At present, the city has, I believe this goes back to, I think, 2012 perhaps, when the city was utilizing govdeals.com. I'm not going to read the entire, it's a very good staff summary, but I'm not going to read it in its entirety. Councilman Stevens asked whether or not there would be an allowance, a provision for us to set certain thresholds in selling an item before, in putting forth an item. And obviously, if you get incredibly low bids, then we would have the ability to reject that. I think it's something that needs to be, as I like to say, memorialized, because the city has utilized it for a number of years, govdeals.com, but there hasn't been anything on paper, again, that solidifies it. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions or comments that either you or council members have.
Okay. Any questions for Andy on this?
Yeah, Your Honor, I have a
Matt,
question.
go ahead.
And I haven't been real vocal, and I've had this question for a few days, but finding the time to ask it's another thing. So I just figured I'd throw it out here now. In this policy, and I've read it, and it looks really good. My concern is when we have something that holds historical value, something in the city that, such as the museum would like to obtain for our ongoing history record. Who makes a determination on how that would be offered up to be donated to another not-for-profit company? I see that on here. The city administrator has the sole authority to do that. Okay, I just want to put that out there because I think a lot of times we get in a hurry, and sometimes I don't want to see historically significant things that the city has done, such as plaques, or it may not apply to these, but Councilmember Stevens talked about runway lights. Now, those probably aren't historical, but if they were to be, I want to make sure that those things are preserved to be in the proper place. And so I just have that reservation about this policy that it's not in there, but I'm not sure how you could word that either. So just a concern I have.
Councilman Dalby, I think it's a point well taken. The other item relates to, obviously, if council members come to me and they feel very strongly about something, they would not want to, just say for lack of a better term, put up through GovDeals. I can't promise what the person's going to do that's going to follow me, but all items being equal, if it's something reasonable, likely we would pull that aside and not put that up. That is, again, something for council to consider anyway. But it creates a policy that I wish I would have had in other cities, and that is this. In a previous city that I worked at in Missouri, when we had surplus items, it usually went to those that found out about it, those that got ear of it. So if we had a city equipment, a city vehicle, or something such as that, I feel much more strongly they go through govdeals.com than, hey, a friend of mine down at the street garage wants to sell this carburetor. I think it quite frankly does away with that, and I'm glad the city has that policy. Your point, though, about surplus property and what may or may not be candidates for it is well taken. I'm certainly open to taking suggestions from council.
Your Honor, may I?
Certainly, Bob.
This doesn't deal with historical objects or anything like that. This is for when we have vehicles, equipment that are no longer being used in the day-to-day operations of the city, for a way for us to place them out without having a lot of, he said, she said, you gave somebody preference over this or that. If it was something that actually had some historical value, or I can't imagine what that would be, but that would have to be approved by council, because that's not in the regular operations and equipments of the city's operations. So that's a completely different category of an asset that would be like selling a building. We won't put building on gov deals because that would take council approval to do that. These are pieces of equipment that have no longer have a use in the city's operations. And so instead of having them lay around, we're going to sell them for scrap through the gov deals or to another person. So.
Right. And certainly I did understand that to be the case. I just wanted to make sure that if there was something, things come up at certain, times that may have been around the city as use, as equipment that had been for years that may be an antique or considered something that would be of historical value. And I just wanted to, and I understand that, Bob, that's the way I interpret it too, but I just want to make sure that we preserve those things and we don't let those things slip through the crack. It'd be a one-off time that may happen. It may never happen. But I like to see things that, preserve our history, be preserved. So that's what I meant.
Certainly.
Thanks, Bob, for clearing that up. In the past, if I remember correctly, when I was working in the engineering department, we had some old instruments and stuff that we wanted, and we donated it to the historical museum down here, and different stuff like that. There was a siren on top of this building. I don't know what happened to that, but it may be donated somewhere. But anyway, thanks for clearing that up.
That's what my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ready to vote? Take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 3153, 2019, amending the chapter 31.5 solid waste of the Code of Ordinances, Municipal Code of the City of Ottumwa, Iowa, by repealing sections 31.5 through 35 in its entirety and enacting a substitute in lieu thereof. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance number 3153, 2019.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Good evening again. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. This ordinance increases the residential trash collection rate from $16.90 per month to $7.20 effective July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021. This rate increase is built into the collection contract and occurs once every 2 years. This will be the last increase on your current contract. Customers qualifying for the City Energy Assistance Program will have their monthly bills reduced by $2 and pay $15.20. No other fee changes are made as part of this ordinance.
Okay. Any questions for Kevin? So really, you're talking about $3.60 increase for the year.
16. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2 years.
But
this is the last 2 years of your contract. I'm sorry.
For the 2 years.
I was trying to figure out what you. Yeah, this is the last 2 years of our existing contract. We will be rebidding at the end of this term.
21. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Thank you.
Waive the second and third consideration, pass and adopt ordinance number 3153, 2019.
Is there a motion?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Any questions? Take the roll.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember Strebe?
Yes.
Councilmember Berg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dalby?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Item J, we have opportunity for public input. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak to the council that hasn't had a chance to do so? Seeing none, we'll move to K. The only comment I would make tonight is that yesterday I represented the city council at Pickwick School and issued a mayoral proclamation for child abuse. April is the National Child Abuse Prevention Month. And believing that children are our future, we want to be sure that they're well taken care of. And our early childhood education program sponsored a training at Pickwick, and it's a good program, and I think just want to make the council aware of that. Is there anything else the council wants to bring to attention of staff? Or okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We don't need to take the roll on that. We can say yay or nay. So those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's carried. And I have
723.
723.